Hey everyone, welcome to our Advanced Screaming Frog Tips webinar. Really excited to have a lot of you here today. We'll wait for kind of some people to join in. As you're joining in, please feel free to engage with the chat. Tell us your name, what city you're coming in from. We really like to see people kind of coming in from all different places. Few different housekeeping things as kind of we get started here. One of the biggest questions we get asked on a lot of these webinars is are they going to be recorded? And am I going to have a version? And the answer is yes. Is if you're joining on LinkedIn Live or you're joining on Twitter or YouTube, you can watch a recording of the video on whatever platform you attended from. So if you're on LinkedIn Live, right, you can just simply go back to the webinar link afterward, and then you'll be able to see the full webinar once it's completed. And it uploads to LinkedIn. So that's one of the most common questions that we get asked. As well, just to note for everyone, there oftentimes is a little bit slight delay. We're using a tool called StreamYard. Sometimes there's a delay between when it goes live on StreamYard to actually LinkedIn. So just note that in the comments. If you comment and we don't see it or respond to it immediately, sometimes it's because there's that delay, right? Just to note for everybody. So let's go ahead and get started here. We have a great guest today. We have Aaron James. He's one of the data manager or SEO and data managers at Screaming Frog. He's been with Screaming Frog for nearly 10 years at this point and is one of the most foremost experts on the tool. So I'm super excited to have him on because I'm going to learn a lot about like advanced Screaming Frog tips. And I think you all are as well. With that, I'll kind of go through and we can start to go through and talk about kind of what we're going to talk about today, right? And that's going to be advanced Screaming Frog tips for you all, right? What are some ways that we can take Screaming Frog from, hey, we are comfortable doing some basic crawling and, crawls to the site and finding internal links and understanding metadata to maybe some of the more advanced use cases, right? How can we up our game beyond that? Bit of a background as we start here. I'm Chris Long, I'm the VP of Marketing at GoFish Digital. We are a full service digital marketing agency. We work with everything from SEO, digital PR, content marketing, reputation management, paid media. We work across a very full service set. So if you ever need support in any of these areas, feel free to reach out. We have a lot of experience working with different clients. We like to say everyone from mid-market to Fortune 500 companies, Geico, Adobe, Amazon, have really a lot of good experience working with larger clients and with more digital marketing type of consulting. As well, you can see a little bit about where we've been featured. Washington Post, NPR, Moz, and as well some of those clients that I mentioned, Amazon, Airbnb, Marriott, Adobe, working with a wide range of features. We've won at GoFish Digital, we've won quite a few awards throughout our tenure. We've been named Best SEO Agency 4 different times as well last year. We won Best PPC Agency from US Search Awards. Also won awards for Most Innovative PPC Campaign, most Best Digital PR Campaign. Won a lot of different awards from different agencies. So very excited to share those. As well, I'll go ahead and get started with the introduction. So I'm Chris Long. I'm the VP of Marketing at GoFish Digital. I head up our internal marketing efforts here. So everything from our thought leadership to our editorial strategy, paid media strategy. I like to call it marketing for the marketing agency, which is a super fun and challenging job. Been around in SEO for over 10 years at this point. Like I said, working with everything from our small business clients to our enterprise Fortune 500 clients, advising on their search strategies, and have really kind of grew up on the SEO team here at GoFish Digital. So working with everything from more contextual content problems, overall SEO strategy, to actually really deep technical problems, figuring out crawling and indexing issues on large scale sites. So now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. Like I said, I am super excited that Screaming Frog joined us today and agreed to be a guest. We rarely get someone with such great knowledge we really get someone with such great knowledge in a tool like Aaron. So we're super excited to have him. So Aaron, I'll let you go take it away and give your intro.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. It's great to be live with Chris and everyone. So I'm Aaron, I'm the SEO and data manager at Screaming Frog. As Chris said, I've been with Screaming Frog almost a decade now when I first started out in SEO. So these days I primarily do, I not primarily build reporting solutions for our clients and help do consultancy and technical SEO for a wide range of sectors. I also run the SEO Spider training sessions and I help out on the support team. So if you ever get in contact with the support email, you'll be talking to me or one of the other team members. So just a bit about us. So Screaming Frog, we're based in the UK, but most people obviously know us for the SEO Spider and Log File Analyzer. But what comes as a surprise to a lot of people is we're also a full service agency. So we offer technical SEO, SEO consultancy, digital PR, and paid advertisement. So great to be here anyway.
Great. Thanks so much, Aaron. Super excited to have you. And also for everyone on the LinkedIn feed, apologies. Had a slight connection issue that we were able to resolve. So we should be live on LinkedIn now. Once again, just to reconfirm, if you all want to engage with the chat, put your name in, where you're coming in from. Always super excited to see where everyone's kind of calling in from. Always have people from the US and beyond. So super interesting to see that. And now I can kind of tee it off for our topic today. And what we're going to be talking about is advanced Screaming Frog tips. Really, oftentimes in SEO, right? We'll learn. We got onboarded with a new client, a new agency, and then we learn Screaming Frog. We learn a lot of the basics, right? How to crawl the site, how to find internal links, maybe some metadata improvements, use it for some basic content optimizations. But Screaming Frog, it's one of the most complex tools in SEO, but one of the most powerful as well. And you can go super deep in terms of what you can do with Screaming Frog, whether it comes to some of the advanced features like ngram analysis or JavaScript crawling, or some of the new segmentation features they built out. There's a lot of really cool use cases that many of us might not be aware of. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Is what are some of the ways that we can take our Screaming Frog game to the next level, right? And go beyond just, hey, we know how to crawl a site, we know how to crawl an XML sitemap. What are some ways that we can unlock better SEO insights from Screaming Frog, and even better business insights, right? Screaming Frog does a lot in terms of like its custom extraction feature that can even take our insights beyond just SEO. And we're going to be talking about some of those today. So, quick agenda for you all to kind of set the stage here. First, we're going to talk about ngram analysis and some of the new features Screaming Frog has just added on with that, how you can use it for things like internal links and content analysis and even competitor analysis. We're also then going to talk about segmentation. Segmentation is one of the most important concepts in terms of SEO in general, being able to segment your data, whether it's segmenting your ranking data for deeper insights, or segmenting things like your Screaming Frog crawl, right? Being able to figure out which technical issues apply to certain areas of your site. Segmentation is a great, really powerful new feature that Aaron's going to walk us through today. Next, we're going to talk about some metrics to use, JavaScript crawling, e-commerce tips, and then finally, we're also going to talk a little bit about Screaming Frog's custom JavaScript features. Custom JavaScript is a super powerful feature that really allows you to integrate Screaming Frog into other APIs, such as OpenAPI, and really do some cool things with LLMs. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron here, who's going to walk us through some of Screaming Frog's ngram analysis features. So take it away, Aaron.
Thanks, Chris. Right, so starting with ngram analysis, just to provide a bit of an overview for those that don't know what ngram analysis is. Ngrams are basically a sequence of consecutive words, and they enable us to see the word usage on a page, frequency and general patterns, making them really useful for SEO, for text analysis, on-page alignment, and even internal linking. So just to give you a bit of an overview, this is our ngram panel. I'll show you how to get here in a second, but essentially it shows the the ngram data for a page. In this example, we're just looking at a single page, and you can select between different drop downs. The first top left drop down allows you to select between the body text content. And essentially, that's anything between the body tags, but we can also focus in on headings, titles, anchor text, anything that we really want to look at in particular. And then if we have an idea of how many consecutive words we want to focus in on, we can choose between 1 and 6. So now I did mention that we can look at just a single page, but obviously we can select specific pages that we want to look at, and we can, if we really want, select the entire crawl. So there are a few options you can do this with. You can shift click to do batches of page that you specifically want. If you want to do Control A, you can select everything in the crawl. Obviously, something to consider here is depending on how large your crawl is, it might take a little bit longer to process. So perhaps always using ngram analysis on certain sections of your site is going to be a lot easier there. So to access the ngram tab, we'd need to be on the internal tab, then select the pages you actually want to analyze. And then on the bottom right, we've got the ngram tab that allows us to dive into this data. So if you notice that you get this message only available when you store HTML, just to note, ngram data isn't stored by default. We are going to have to go to our configuration settings first of all. So when you go to configuration menu, we need to go to extraction and enable store HTML and store rendered HTML. Now, something to consider here, if you're doing a default crawl and not really worrying about JavaScript rendering, which Chris will touch on a bit later, then you only need to worry about store HTML. If you are crawling with JavaScript rendering, you'll need to enable them both just so you've got a decent comparison later on for other features as well. So when we use ngram analysis, it does by default look at most of what's inside the body tag of the HTML of a page. Most of the time we don't want to use ngram analysis to look at everything, because this also includes the navigation menu, the footer. So it's quite useful to be able to target specific areas of a page. In this example, we're basically focusing in on a certain class, the page content section. And on most websites, especially something like WordPress or popular content management systems, most of the landing page or content of the landing page will be sat within a specific layer. So it allows us to focus on that and ignore footers and navigation. Now to do that, I've got up our website here. So we have a WordPress site, and the theme basically encapsulates all of the on-page content within a certain layer, and that's obviously the page content class that we've chosen beforehand. So if you open up Inspector, so right click and go to Inspector, if you open it up, all you really have to do is hover through the different HTML lines. You don't need to be an expert here, but you'll notice it highlights different areas of the page, so you can get an idea of what's being focused on. So if you find something that encapsulates just the page content, look for the class or ID name, and you can use that to focus the content. So we can optimize ngram data against keyword research. Now, this is probably one of the most basic use cases and one of the main uses for it. But it helps us understand page alignment, content topics to compare against your keyword research, and really help identify areas you can optimize. So this includes the number of times it's mentioned in the body text, how many times those mentions are unlinked, whether it's in the headings, your page title, or the link anchor. So it really allows us to quickly identify areas that we can optimize based on our keyword research. It's also really useful for finding internal linking opportunities. So in this example, we've crawled harvard.edu, and we've crawled the entire site, and we've had a look through the ngram data, and we noticed one of the most standout things here was that international students was mentioned 231 times in the body text, but there are only 216 of those 231 links that mentions that are unlinked. So that kind of presents a huge internal linking opportunity. Perhaps Harvard Edu could be providing more information for those mentions of international students. On the right-hand window, we've got all the URLs that international students were found. We've got the number of times it was found in the body text for each of those URLs, and we can see how many times they're unlinked. So it does present an opportunity here where we can find ways of internally linking that really help both our users and, well, internal linking capability for our site. So another use case for n-gram analysis is to crawl comparable competitor pages, and this can help us find keyword and content opportunities. So in list mode, I've taken 3 of the top ranking competitors for travel insurance, which are Compare the Market, Money Supermarket, and postoffice.co.uk in the UK. And so I've dived into this information a bit. I've had a look, and delay terms were quite useful. So under travel delay, delayed departure, and flight delays, we were noticing that they were being found quite regularly on the postoffice.co.uk website, but they weren't mentioned at all on Money Supermarket or Compare the Market. Now, postoffice.co.uk is the top ranking result, so perhaps that indicates an opportunity for Compare the Market and Money Supermarket to include related content and then provide internal links to supporting content. And then another one that was interesting that we noticed was emergency medical expenses. Now, this was mentioned on postoffice.co.uk and moneysupermarket.com, but it wasn't mentioned on Compare the Market. So perhaps Compare the Market is missing potential opportunity there. Perhaps they could have some content discussing that and linking to supporting material. So it helps really dig into content and identify potential opportunities. So next up, we have crawl segmentation. So crawl segmentation essentially allows us to label URLs based on a various set of rules. So some of the basics labels we've got here are directory, SEO Spider, log file analyzer, tutorials, and ancillary pages. And now these are pretty basic ones. All they do are label URLs based on the URL path. So SEO Spider URLs have SEO Spider labels, etc., but we can do a lot more with it. We've also provided a segmentation rule, taking into account Google Search Console API data to highlight underperforming pages. So moving it on a little bit. So to get to segmentation, for those that don't know, we have to go to our crawl configuration menu, segments, and you'll be presented with something that looks like this. By default, it will be set to address, contains, and whatever search query. Under address, you've got basically any potential data that the SEO Spider presents. That's any API metric, any custom extraction. We'll dig into some of this in a bit. And then obviously contains, does not contain, and there are various rules to actually try and match your data as necessary. So this is our basic segmentation rule for the SEO Spider. It's simply address contains /SEO-Spider. But when we actually want to look into underperforming pages, we can apply a great set of rules here. So first of all, if we want to take in API data, we will have to enable APIs. So go to your configuration menu again, under API access, Google Search Console. If you go through connecting that, and you choose a date range that you want to look at, you can then pull that data into the SEO Spider. And with the segment section, I've set some basic criteria here. Something to caveat is it really depends on your site's traffic, what you consider underperforming pages. So as an example, we pulled in a click-through rate of less than 2%, where clicks are less than 500, and where impressions are above 10,000. So we at least know these pages have been seen. They've got some traffic, but they've got poor click-through rates. And then we're ensuring they're indexable. So the indexability ensures that they're actually going to be showing up in Google. So it does not contain non-indexable. That will only show indexable URLs. And then we're putting in a content type that contains only the HTML pages. In a similar situation, we've got bounce rates as well. So we'd have to attach the GA4 API in a very similar way we would do with the Google Search Console API. And then we can pull in whatever GA4 metrics that we want. In this example, I'm just going to have a look at bounce rates. And essentially, this is going to segment any URLs that are greater than 60% bounce rate with greater than 100 sessions, so we know they're actually getting traffic. And then again, the indexable and or HTML, so we know they're a page that's going to appear in Google search results. We can then segment by custom extraction. So this example basically just looks for tracking codes on a page. So it will look for Google Tag Manager tracking codes, Universal, because it's a little bit outdated now, and GA4 tracking codes. And all it really does is pull in the tracking code if it's there, and the segment is set up to segment if the extractor is empty. So it will highlight any pages that are missing tracking codes. So if we're trying to do an audit and ensure that we're actually tracking everything as we should do, we can do that. And then we can segment by template. So this one's interesting. It's common for pages to share the same template. But what this means is with a site like ours, blog posts don't typically sit in the blog subdirectory. So it allows us to quickly identify blog pages sitting in the root domain instead. So if you look at this example, with a custom extraction, I've pulled in all the classes from the page. In the second example image, you can see all those root domain level URLs. They're all blog posts, and they all share a similar template class. So the post template, default, etc. And that's what we're going to target with the segmentation rule. So we'll set up the segmentation rule to point towards the extractor that we want that to contains a basic template that all these pages have got in common. So we can very quickly highlight all those blog pages that are sat in the root directory and pinpoint what's actually an article and what's not. And then if you really want to get into grouping your segments, we can segment by segment. So this can be interesting, particularly when you've got large groups of segments and you're trying to subgroup everything. But it allows you to basically, if we look at the underperforming pages, I've added a segment that does not match regex, and that's going to be our ancillary page segment. So all the ancillary pages that we've pre-grouped under a segment, we can completely exclude from our segmentation rule here. So it ignores those that, and by ancillary pages, I mean something like our contact us page, about us, perhaps pages that we want to exclude from underperforming page analysis that we know are probably not going to have the best click-through rates there. And just something to point out here, when we're actually trying to segment a segment, we have to ensure that it's actually sat under our base segments. So essentially in blue, all our basic groupings of segments, and then under that would have to be if we're going to be trying to use segment by segments. Then I've got a couple of useful tips. For those that have used segmentation, it can be quite time consuming to put together all these rules. So what you can consider is, instead of using and combining multiple and rules, you can actually just use a bit of regex instead and combine all of those into a single row. So the top example would be the normal and rule base, whereas the second example would be how we would do that with regex. So it allows you to copy and paste and very quickly speed that up. And if you want to output in a Google spreadsheet, you could perhaps do it that way as well to do it on a larger scale. And we've also got exactly the same for the OR as well, the OR rule. So again, when putting together multiple rules for the OR segmentation setup, it can get quite cumbersome. So we can just do it by regex and combine it all together, and it's just a copy and paste situation that way. So it speeds up the entire process, and then we can always save it for later as well.
All right. Thanks so much, Aaron. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use Screaming Frog for JavaScript crawling. So this is one of my favorite use cases of Screaming Frog because as you start to deal with more and more complex sites, whether you're an agency or whether you work on a site that uses a lot of JavaScript, you need to get data around that site, right? And it can be hard. It can be harder to do unless you know some of Screaming Frog's more advanced JavaScript crawling features. So this is something I find myself using pretty much on a regular basis in terms of Screaming Frog. Is there is their individual JavaScript crawling features. So let's walk through those today. The problem is that sites with really heavy JavaScript, they they can turn up blank, right? If you turn off JavaScript, right, it's like and just only would load like the HTML. Like this is what a page would look like. It would look like in some sites basically no content at all. Um, that's what it's going to look like with just an HTML only crawler. And similarly, right, if you try to crawl this site with just Screaming Frog native in its default settings, so Screaming Frog by default is set to what's called an old Ajax crawling scheme. Um, it's going to be really useful, one of the fastest options, and maybe a good option if you have a more basic site. But if you try to crawl a JavaScript site like we just showed you, right, where all the content loads, just using the old Ajax crawling scheme, well, what you're going to get is something like this, right? You're going to get where maybe it gives you a forbidden status code, or maybe it just doesn't find the content at all. Sometimes it will just literally find the home page. Sometimes it will just find the home page, the URL you entered, and then not be able to find any internal links. Why is that? Because if all the links are loaded through JavaScript, well, Screaming Frog needs to execute that JavaScript similar to how Google would in order to find that content. So if you have a JavaScript site and you want to say, hey, I want to know exactly how does Google see my site? Well, you can set up Screaming Frog to emulate how search engines actually see your site in a very similar fashion. So what you need to do is you need to go into your spider rendering section, and then you need to change it from old Ajax crawling scheme. And there's an actual JavaScript button or a selection you can make, right? You can turn that on, and then if I would go back to the exact same site, right, and try to crawl it, instead of getting something like this where it only maybe finds a single URL, now it's going to actually crawl the entire site, right? You can start to see in that highlighted area how I have multiple URLs. Down there, way at the bottom there, you can see we've crawled a couple of hundred URLs with this process. Now, by turning on JavaScript, you've been able to really get a better understanding of how search engines actually see your site, because Google, Bing, other search engines, they're going to use JavaScript crawling in that quote unquote second wave of indexing, right? This is how you use Screaming Frog in order to see, hey, what are search engines seeing, right? With my site uses JavaScript, I want it to crawl like JavaScript. Now, there are some drawbacks here, right? The biggest drawback is this is going to make your call a little bit slower, right? It's similar to the search engine, and you can kind of empathize with the search engines when you do this here, because you'll see your crawling go from maybe really fast to very slow, right? And it'll slow down the crawler, right? Because Screaming Frog needs to process the JavaScript. But at the end of the day, right, it's going to be a much more accurate representation of what your site looks like in Google's eyes and how search engines are able to actually crawl and index your site. So if you use a lot of JavaScript, turn that JavaScript crawling feature on. It's going to be a really useful feature in order to actually see how search engines view your site. Now, another great tip, and on top of this, right, another bonus tip here is if you're crawling the JavaScript, you can enable render page screenshots. This is really phenomenal because a lot of times we're not really sure, because we say, hey, we know our site uses JavaScript, but like how do search engines see our site, right? Are they able to fully execute the JavaScript? Are they not? What would a page look like with JavaScript turned on? Screaming Frog allows you to see that directly in tool. Right now, a lot of times, like people go to like the individual like URL like inspector to check. But Screaming Frog can do this all natively. So you can do this, and you can actually, when you perform your crawl, you'll actually be able to click on any one individual page, and then in this right-hand sidebar here, you'll actually be able to see Google's view of the rendered page, right? So here you can see maybe there are some issues loading on this individual site. So maybe this is something we need to check up on and say, hey, Screaming Frog's not able to load all of our resources here. Is Google able to, right? Can we get Google? Can we check and see, is Google able to render the full DOM, right? Is Google able to actually see all of our visual assets, all of our interactive assets? Now you actually have a screenshot on a mobile view like Google does, right? Also important is like you want to switch your user agent to smartphone, so that way you can see the mobile view. But another really powerful part of this is if you're like a really large site, you can use these to see like how Google analyze like views your site like at scale, right? Like you don't right now with SEOs, if you want to check like your JavaScript rendering, you have to go and use the URL inspector and do it one by one. Here with Screaming Frog and using the visual page, using the visual the rendered page tool, you can actually see, you can go through one by one and see, hey, I can see 5 category pages at once, or I can see 6 product pages at once. So if you have a really large site, this can be a way to quickly check multiple pages, right? And see, hey, are we getting the indexation we want, or but for whatever reason, does the JavaScript crawling not actually render a certain part? Another great part of this is you can actually see the full page, right? In Google, oftentimes the rich results tool will actually like stop after a certain section. You'll be able to see maybe the first quarter of your page, maybe. In Screaming Frog, you can actually see the complete render, right? So a huge benefit to using Screaming Frog JavaScript crawling. Use this analyze pages report. Super useful, super helpful, so you can see exactly what Google's crawling without having to manually use URL inspector and search console or the rich results test over and over again. You can get this information a lot faster in Screaming Frog. Next favorite Screaming Frog JavaScript kind of example is actually understanding the percent of your content loaded through JavaScript. Like Screaming Frog will directly tell you that percentage. Once again, super powerful. So once you have JavaScript turned on, once you've turned on JavaScript crawling, in the reporting on the right-hand sidebar, you'll go to this contains JavaScript link under the JavaScript. So you'll actually be able to see, hey, which pages contain JavaScript content? That's this report right here. So I go on this report, and then you can see right here, if I crawled Forever 21 site, now I can see the percentage. So right now I can see that the homepage of the site is almost 80% JavaScript, right? And it changes the word count by 1,200 words. And now I can know, hey, these are the pages that are more reliant on JavaScript. And now I can start to get an idea of how much content on my site is JavaScript dependent. You can use this to test and see. So if you're crawling a site for the first time, you might say, hey, I'm going to crawl the site and see, is JavaScript an actual problem? Will we have an issue of partial indexing or incomplete indexing, whatever the case is? Because now I can see these pages are largely dependent on JavaScript in order to load. So you can see the percentage and you can actually see the word count used to do that. It's a really, really powerful feature. You might want to take it a step further though. You might want to see, okay, I not only want to see how much of an individual page is required, but I want to see what content on that page actually requires JavaScript in order to execute. So Screaming Frog also offers that. A very little known feature, but you can use their diff comparison feature to actually directly compare the raw HTML on the left and the red versus what's loaded via JavaScript. So in order to do this, Aaron talked about this earlier. Before you start your crawl, you'll actually go into your extract. You'll actually go into extraction here on the left sidebar in your crawl configuration settings. And then at the bottom, there's two boxes you'll check. One is called store HTML. The next is store rendered HTML. The first one will store the raw HTML. The second one will actually store the JavaScript execution of the HTML. So you're basically saying, hey, Screaming Frog, I want you to store the raw HTML, and then I want you to store the rendered HTML along with it. And then what it does is after you execute your crawl with JavaScript, you can go to an individual page. And at the bottom here, you can see this view source tab. We'll just click that and then check the show differences box. And that box, by doing that, it'll take a little to process. We'll then highlight all the differences between the raw HTML and then the content loaded. So once again, now you can start to go in and see not only does my page use a lot of JavaScript, but which individual sections are required in order to have that JavaScript execute. So if you're an e-commerce site, you might see, wow, my entire category pages, my product listings and the category pages need JavaScript in order to execute. are the related links, or the widgets, color widgets that load, or my faceted navigation, you'll be able to see, okay, which ones are JavaScript independent. And now you can start to test those, right? Now you can start to go and actually test, hey, are these getting indexed? Are we getting a full indexation, a partial indexation? Now you can see which of your exact site elements are most at risk of not getting fully indexed by JavaScript, and getting missed out in terms of having comprehensive page quality. It's a super useful feature. If you're auditing a JavaScript site, use this diff compare tool to see, hey, what's the difference from what is the raw HTML and then what content, specific content, all the HTML elements that are actually getting loaded and parsed through JavaScript. Super powerful feature of Screaming Frog. So cool. Now I want to take a second to have a quick poll right here. Oftentimes when we do these webinars, we've gotten a lot of questions from people saying, hey, we want to get some SEO insights for our own site, right? Well, we're starting to offer that more and more now. So I want to start a quick poll to see if anyone is interested in a mini SEO audit. It's about an 8-page document that covers everything from market share metrics, content creation. We have our own proprietary AI tools and then competitive intelligence. If you're interested in this, just please give me a comment. Just please comment in the comments, just saying, hey, I'm interested. We can go ahead and set up a time to actually send you your SEO audit. Like I said, this audit will cover everything from search market share metrics. So search market share metrics would be which competitors are the biggest in terms of search market share, so you can better understand your true search competitors. We'll also figure out like, hey, what content do you need to create in order to be a topical authority in your vertical? So maybe if you're in the email marketing space, how can you become a true competitor in terms of topical authority in email marketing? As well, we also use proprietary insights from our own AI tools. They basically use Google's own technology, Vertex AI, to score how content looks. We can do that, and then actually for an individual page, using Google's own technology, say, hey, this is how optimized this page is in terms of our similarity metrics. So if you're interested, please comment in the comments. We'll get back to you and comment and set up a time to meet and chat and go through your mini SEO audit. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about e-commerce tips, right? How can we use Screaming Frog to enhance our e-commerce, right? If you're a big e-com site, how do you once again use Screaming Frog to really better understand your site? I've used Screaming Frog a lot for e-commerce sites. It's probably one of the best use cases for using Screaming Frog is kind of really understanding like advanced e-commerce sites. So one of a great use case for using Screaming Frog is if you're an e-commerce site, identifying out-of-stock products. E-commerce sites often carry a lot of out-of-stock products that are still indexable. You can still get indexed by Google, can be discovered by search engines. And generally, you don't want that, right? You want to have a plan to say, hey, do we redirect these pages? Do we 404 them? And really only keep them up if we have a specific reason for that. But with Screaming Frog, it makes it really easy to do, right? And you can do it at scale. So first, you'll need to go on to whatever your site is. So here I'm on Forever 21 site. And then you just need to figure out, okay, what is the terminology associated with an out-of-stock page? Oftentimes it's out of stock, but sometimes it's not available, or later. We've seen all types of kind of see when available. We've seen all types of different language for how e-commerce sites structure this. You just need to find the one that your website, your product page template uses. So, and then figure that out. And then what you can do is you can use Screaming Frog's custom search. So Screaming Frog has a custom search feature. You'll just plug that text in to Screaming Frog's custom search feature. So here I just typed in size out of stock. And then what you can do is go ahead and then start your crawl, right? And then once you start your crawl, on the right here, you'll go to the actual contain section of your custom search. And in that filter, Screaming Frog will show you any page that had text that matched that search. So now all of a sudden you can directly see, hey, what are all of my out of stock pages? Another advanced tip is if you're an e-commerce site, do this search and then crawl your XML sitemap, because your XML sitemap will be things where you're sending Google pages you want to index. We've seen examples where e-commerce sites have sitemaps that are high as 60% of out of stock products, which isn't good because basically you're saying to Google, hey, crawl these pages and index them. They're high priority pages, but they're not really available, right? So that could be construed as thin content or content Google's going to waste crawl budget on. Generally, you don't want that. So you can use Screaming Frog's custom search in order to figure out where are my out of stock pages if you're a large scale e-com site. Super useful in order to do. Um, Next is going to be crawl segmentation. Aaron already touched upon this a lot, but I would double down this, and especially if you're an e-commerce site, crawl segmentation is exceptionally valuable. It's going to really allow you to analyze like themes and issues of your site more at scale, right? Even just by using simple segmentation, you can start to understand which issues apply to certain templates. So if you go, you can use Screaming Frog segment builder that Aaron had already has already demoed, right? And then create segments, right? But create segments specific to your e-com site. So you might create segments for your marketing pages, right? Your category pages, your product pages, your blog. You have other types of content. Maybe you have a help desk, maybe you have a help section. Whatever your different templates are, create individual segments for those. So you can just do that, and you can use an address segment, and then you can have it say contains. In this example, maybe we're a Shopify site. We have it say collections because that's what Shopify sites, the path that's used for all category pages. Then you can begin your crawl with these sections in mind, right? With these segments in mind. Next, what you can do is once the crawl is complete, instead of going to the overview tab, you can actually go one over to what's called issues. And then what Screaming Frog will show you is this very visual report. In this report, it will actually break down, hey, which segments were most impacted by this issue. This is going to be a really great way to identify like really high priority issues that based on templates. So you might say, hey, looking at this, my product pages are all missing in H1, but that doesn't apply to my category pages. Or you might say, hey, my title tags on my product pages look pretty good, but when I segment it down to my category pages, well, they typically have shorter title tags. So maybe we want to like have a category page initiative where we expand those a bit more. So now by using segments, you're starting to figure out what are template level recommendations that you can make to your e-commerce site, right? So use that, especially that, and even just really simply, like I said, if you just use the address ones, just filter down to your core page types, category, product, blog, super helpful, super easy to figure out which issues can you improve at scale, or which issues are impacting different templates, and how do you go and fix those issues. The next e-commerce tip is extracting competitive data. So this even takes us outside of just traditional SEO a little bit. Aaron has mentioned to me that his team gets asked all of the time, how do you get competitive SEO insights? Well, you can get that with Screaming Frog and do it for e-commerce. And e-commerce is great because you can do it at scale. So here I have several sections highlighted. You can see in red here, you can see, hey, for competitors, like how many products do they have out of stock? What's their price for products, right? Then you can start to figure out like what's their average price. And if you create segments for categories, you could even figure out what's their average price for different categories on their site. You can do it by product reviews. Hey, we want to do an analysis of a competitor and see on average how many reviews do they have for individual products versus how many reviews do we have. You can get that data with Screaming Frog, and you can use custom extraction to do this, right? So you can go in, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, right? You can go in and you can use custom extraction. It's in your crawl settings, right? You can go into custom extraction, and then you can say, hey, I want to do price, right? And then you can define the CSS path, right? Or an X path of exactly which area you want to extract from the HTML. So in this example, maybe I say, hey, from a competitor, I want to extract price information, and I want to extract reviews. Now these operators are fine. Do these CSS path commands or the XPath commands can be a little bit more complicated. Can use things like ChatGPT to help. But Screaming Frog has an even better feature if you're not super technical. You need help writing the actual code in order to extract this. What you can do is you're in the very left here. You can click right to the left. There's a little globe icon that will actually pull up a live version of the page, and then you can actually click around on that page. And then Screaming Frog will actually give you suggestions, which you can see on the right, for exactly how to write your XPath, how to write your CSS path, and exactly how to extract those elements. So I might click on the fourth, I might test a couple, and I might land on the fourth one here, because that seems to be the one that's giving me the most consistent results. Then I go and start my crawl. And then here for Steve Madden's site, I was able to get all of the pricing information for all of their different products, right? Like I said, you could even take this a step further. You could even take it and say, hey, now I want to create segments for these products. And I want to see, hey, I want to see how they price shoes versus they price apparel versus how they price, other product offerings that Steve Madden might have. you can start to get competitive data that you can then use to other teams, maybe your business intelligence team, to actually figure out how are they pricing certain things. You can do the same thing with the reviews. You can do the same thing with how many related products they have. There's a whole lot of options that you can do to use custom extraction for e-commerce. So super useful, especially if you're maybe interested in getting more than just SEO insights out of Screaming Frog. If you say, hey, I want to pull something custom from that Screaming Frog site, Screaming Frog doesn't have a built-in way to extract it. You just have to use Screaming Frog to go and create that yourself. And the tool even helps you create something custom just for you in that use case. Final bonus one for e-commerce. You can also use Screaming Frog to analyze your robots.txt. I don't think this is used enough, especially after Google has completely sunset the robots.txt tester. You can do that in Screaming Frog at scale. So you can basically configure Screaming Frog to analyze your current robots.txt, and Screaming Frog will tell you whether that URL is allowed or whether it's blocked, right? If for an e-commerce site, if you're like Lowe's and you have a very large robots.txt with all sorts of exclusions and it can jumble your brain in terms of like what's actually going on, Screaming Frog will just tell you exactly whether those URLs are crawlable, exactly which line is being the primary disallow command, so you don't have to go and manually figure that out, right? So highly recommend that. If your e-commerce site, they actually have a robots.txt feature right in the right-hand sidebar, and it'll actually say excluded. They'll actually say excluded from robots.txt. You can click that and see whether that URL was included or not. All right, kick things back to Aaron. You're back up and you can talk about some custom JavaScript features.
Thanks, Chris. So custom JavaScript is one of our newest and most powerful features in the SEO Spider. And so first off, to actually get to it, we're going to have to enable JavaScript rendering. So back to our configuration menu, which we should be well aware of now, going to rendering and choosing JavaScript rendering. And then once we've done that, we'll want to go back to the configuration menu, navigate to custom JavaScript. And this will present our custom JavaScript overview. If we head to add from library, we've got a bunch of pre-existing snippets already in the library. Some of these we've put in ourselves, and we've had a couple of includes from other users. They've sent them to us, and we've included them over time. So just to give you a bit of background, there's a bunch of different AI models you can choose between. So ChatGPT, Gemini, and Llama. Obviously, ChatGPT and Gemini are the ones that are going to be used most prolifically. Once you've chosen your actual snippet that you want to look at, so in this example, we're generating alt text for all the images on a page. So we'd crawl a page, it would find all the images, and it would generate an alt text for all of them. Once you've actually chosen the snippet we want to look at, you can edit this by going to the little highlighted JS button. And the only thing you actually have to really do in any of these pre-existing snippets is add your own API key. So within the highlighted section, it will be your API key, and you just add that there. Something to keep in mind, obviously your API key depends on the AI model chosen. So ChatGPT will require an OpenAI API key, and Gemini would require Gemini API key. You'd have to go to the relevant site to generate these, but once you've got them, they do have free and paid options, so it's worth taking a look at least. More interestingly, we've also got snippet templates. So the two highlighted ones are ChatGPT and Gemini. And the difference between these and the pre-existing snippets is the fact that we ask questions as well. So you'll have to put in your API, and then you can ask your own question. And this will, if any of you use ChatGPT, you'll put in your question, and the AI model will give you a response, an answer to your question. It's basically doing the same thing, but it's doing it on scale across all the URLs you're crawling, which can be really handy. So in this example, I'm just asking a random provide potential content and keyword gap opportunities for the page copy. And I want to make sure this actually works and see what I'm actually going to get back from the AI model. So what I've done is I've added in a test URL in the bottom right there, and I've pressed test, and it's then, if your API is working, then it will generate and output a answer for you. So we've been looking at extraction type snippets so far, but there are also action type snippets, which are really powerful. My most used one personally is the scroll page one. So if we open up this snippet in the editor, you've got some parameters you can change, but generally you can leave it as it is. So you've got the number of times to scroll. By default, that's 5, and the scroll wait period, which waits in between each scroll. And this could be used to render lazy loading elements and infinite scrolling pages. So doesn't look like the GIF's going to work at the minute, but essentially what it does is it will start the script, it will crawl through the page 5 times, and it will ensure that you actually render the material properly onto the page. So it's probably more noticeable on product pages that have a scroll scroll function where it lazy loads products on, and you won't be able to actually crawl those product URLs unless the user interaction is showcased. So what this snippet does, it will generate the user action by scrolling through a page, ensuring those lazy loaded elements are actually rendered into the page properly. And we can actually test this by doing exactly what we've done for the extraction method, add in our URL, but this time we're going to toggle that far right button. And once we've toggled it, press test, and it'll open an external browser, and you can actually see what the snippet is doing. So this image should actually be a GIF, and it should be scrolling through the page. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be working right now. But what it would do is it would scroll through 5 times, thus rendering everything on the page. So something to note, when you actually go to the library, instead of choosing system to look at the pre-existing snippets, you can actually go to user. This will be where all your own personal ones that you've potentially made or imported yourself. And something to note is you can import and export and share them with people, but always remember to remove your API key if you are sharing them with people. And we love to see custom JavaScript snippets. If you want to share them with us, please do. And there's a chance we'll include them in the main library of snippets. As I said earlier, we already include some users' snippets as is. You can have a look through the JS editor and you can see who actually supplied some of them. And you can send an email with more information or providing your snippets to support@screamingfrog.co.uk.
Cool. Thanks so much, Aaron. So wanted to offer up one last time, final poll here. If anyone else is interested in the mini SEO audit, once again, we'll be covering market share metrics, content creation analysis. I think probably one of the biggest benefits is seeing our custom AI tool. Once again, we will take an individual page that's maybe ranking, striking distance for a query that you want to be ranking for, and then this tool will actually score how that content is optimized, right? So it'll go through every section. It'll go through your H1 tag. It'll go through your individual headings, your text. We can get a sense of, hey, how well optimized is that page for the target keyword, right? So we'll provide a quick analysis for you to kind of showcase that and then even walk through that on a separate consulting call, right? So that's probably one of the coolest, most unique features of the SEO audit. So if you're interested, just go ahead in the chat and type interested or send me it. And then we'll find a way to connect with you all and then figure out how to kind of send that. But the proprietary AI tool, something that we're working on here at Go Fish Digital. One thing we found super helpful in actually having quantifiable metrics to say, hey, is this page actually optimized? It takes kind of the guesswork out of, is a page optimized? Now, instead of saying, hey, content optimization is only a qualitative thing, this tool actually walks through and says, hey, no, it's a quantitative actual analysis, right? So we'll do that in terms of the analysis and then walk through in terms of how it works for you all. Like I said, please comment in the chat at any point if you're interested in that. Like I said, we'll find a way to get in touch with you. So cool. Now that brings us to the questions part. So I'm going to bring Aaron back up onto the stage here. And we're going to walk through some of the biggest questions that people have been asking, right? So once again, there is a little bit of a delay between Aaron and I's feed and the other streaming platforms like LinkedIn. So start commenting now, and then we'll be able to see your comments in about 30 seconds or so. but there is that little bit of delay. So to start, Aaron, I'm going to ask in terms of, you work with a lot of other agencies, a lot of different companies in terms of like their Screaming Frog implementations. What are some of the most creative ways you've seen them integrate with LLMs like ChatGPT, right? I think there's some really easy use cases where it's like, hey, we use it to create meta descriptions. We use it to create alt text for images. What are some of the other use cases you're seeing people in terms of using Screaming Frog's OpenAI integration?
So after one of my favorites so far that I've seen, and we've actually integrated this into our main library, is the people also ask integration. So the custom JavaScript allows you to connect to basically any APIs if you write the code yourself. And essentially, we're seeing more and more people combine other platforms' APIs into the SEO Spider and seeing more data pulled in, which is really interesting.
Cool, that's great. Um, in terms of let's say maybe you're an SEO that's not as technically savvy, right? What Screaming Frog use cases do you see for people doing maybe more like content contextual audits, right? What are some of the best use cases you see there?
So I would say nowadays, since we've released Ngram Analysis, certainly that is good to dive into just to help you support your uh, keyword research. But also, we've obviously got the content area specification, so you can get grammar tools, spelling tools integrated into that, near duplicates and duplicate content, so you can really dig into content and see perhaps what is too templated, what is too similar, and gives you an idea of what you can basically update and optimize.
Cool, that's great. Yeah, the Ngram analysis has been super useful in terms of figuring out like, hey, how well is this page optimized, as well as like you said, for finding some of those internal linking opportunities. Um, One question we got from Christina over here is any chance of a Copilot integration coming soon for Screaming Frog?
So we have a very long feature request list, and we have got a lot of APIs on that list. So if you want a particular API integration, please let us know. We'll put it on the list and see what we can do about it. But with the custom JavaScript feature, there are definitely ways people can put together their own JavaScript to integrate some of that as well.
Cool, awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for your time. It was awesome. You have a wealth of knowledge, one of the foremost experts in terms of how to use Screaming Frog. So we really appreciate you joining us, helping us walk through some of these advanced use cases. And to everyone who attended today, thank you so much. If you're watching later, it's great to be able to take the time to present in front of you all, share some of our kind of favorite Screaming Frog tips. It's a tool that I think all of us use every single day, right? Um, but it's always good to be able to say, hey, how can we get 1% better with using a tool like Screaming Frog? And hopefully, some of these tips, whether you have a JavaScript site, an e-commerce site, whether you can see benefits from Ngram analysis or cross segmentation, hopefully you all walk away from here with some really good takeaways as you start going. So appreciate everyone joining us today, and happy crawling, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me, Chris.